The Miami Hurricanes will beat the Florida State Seminoles if...
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are a day closer to the rivalry game, Miami Hurricanes, Florida State Seminoles. I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Miami will beat the Florida State Seminoles if. Now, it's going to be a tough game, guys. Florida State's favored by more than a touchdown for a reason. I'm going to give you a few, and then my guest is going to give you his. I think Miami will beat Florida State if Tyler Van Dyke plays. I'm not saying they can't beat them without Tyler Van Dyke, but TVD goes or doesn't go makes a huge difference. That's number one. Number two, Miami's got to be able to run the football. Florida State, their rushing defense is bang average. Their passing defense is very good. Their scoring defense is very good, but they do give up about 145 yards per game on the ground. I'm hoping Henry Parrish and maybe Jalen Knighton will be back out of the doghouse this week and exploit that a little bit. And then number three for me, you've got to win the turnover margin in this one. I think Miami's got to be at least +1 or +2 in the turnover margin to get this one done. Let's bring in our very good friend, Rashad Butler, former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle, a guy who knows what it takes to beat Florida State, because you beat Florida State several times, Rashad, during your time at the U.
Yes, I did. My only loss to Florida State was my last year in 2005 on that I think it was Labor Day, Monday night in Tallahassee.
Oh, I remember when they used to do those late. It was like a few years they did all those.
2004 and 2005, yes.
So, what do you think, Rashad, it's going to take? And I know that I laid out a tall order. It's like, yeah, if you win the turnover margin and if Tyler Van Dyke starts and if you can run the football effectively, you're going to win most games doing that. What is your if? Miami Hurricanes will beat the Florida State Seminoles if.
Okay. Since you covered everything on the offensive side of the ball, the only thing I want to say on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's important, whether it's Tyler Van Dyke or Jake Garcia, for Gaddis to call a game to where he is constantly ahead of the sticks. I think Miami cannot afford to be behind the sticks in this game, in specific with Jake Garcia. Now, defensively, I think the defensive line, they need to have a huge day. They need to really get after Jordan Travis, and they really need to rush with contain, understanding that he's a dual threat quarterback. And if they start to get a little wild in their rush, he can hurt them by taking off and getting first downs. And I think the secondary needs to have their best game of the season, because I think we've seen this secondary have its ups and downs, more downs than ups this season. And this is a game where I think this secondary could say, you know what, we are coming of age and we are getting better. So I think those things, along with the things you mentioned, need to happen for Miami to have a legitimate chance to win. Because, I know Miami fans may not want to hear this, but I do think Florida State is a good team this year offensively. I think Florida State should only have 3 losses. I mean, that loss against NC State, I don't know why they chose to throw the ball, when basically all they had to do was run it and just kick a field goal and win the game. So, I mean, this is I'll say this is the best Florida State team we've seen since their coach has got there. I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, Norvell.
Yes. Yeah.
Easily.
So, yeah. So, Florida State's playing well, and their record says such, being 5-4, and I think they should be 6-3.
Yeah, and something, Florida State clearly on paper better than Miami, and when the line opened, Florida State were 9.5 point favorites, depending on which sports book you look at. It's still, the line has shrunk because that's a big line. So I'm looking at it around 7.5 right now. So Seminoles are still favored by more than a touchdown, but And I usually stay away from betting Miami games anyway because I'm terrible luck. But I think in a rivalry game, especially when the home team is a 7.5 point underdog, that do you feel that way? That that's probably a little bit too big of a spread for you. Kind of throw the odds and the records out when it's a rivalry game like this.
No, I agree. I agree. I think that's really too big when really you're separated by one loss, and like I just said, you can argue two losses. And again, this is a rivalry game, and Florida State is coming into Miami. So yeah, that's a huge spread. And honestly, I think it's going to be a really close game, and it may come down to one of those epic games that I used to play in back in the early 2000s.
And you played in this game many times. It just, this is a rivalry that goes back to the 1950s. So this is bigger than anyone who actually steps on that field because there's so much history behind it. There's so much local intrigue behind it. I mean, so many of these players that are wearing garnet and gold or orange and green played together or against each other in high school. So there's bragging rights on the line here. Obviously, this is a big one for recruiting, which we'll talk about later. But when you go through the tunnel for Miami versus Florida State, does it feel different?
For me, it used to feel completely different. In specific, back when we had the OB, because that was one of the marquee games where they brought in the extra stands that will close off. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, the East end zone.
I think it was the East.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was the East. And you just knew. And again, back during those days in the early 2000s, that was when ABC had the prime time spot that was 12 noon. And those games were always blistering hot, man. But you just knew because, again, it was, top tier talent running around on that field on both sides of the ball. And just, like I said, the mystique of the Orange Bowl and just having that East end zone closed off and just knowing all the wide rights and so forth, it just felt different. It really did back then.
You played in some incredible matchups between the Canes and the Seminoles. During your era, like one of the big individual performances that stands out was you guys were up in Tallahassee 2003, the rain game, and
Yes.
Sean Taylor. I mean, obviously we know what an incredible player he was, but he had 2 interceptions, could have easily had 4 INTs in the game. Probably if the ball wasn't so wet, he would have had 4 or 5 interceptions, scored a defensive touchdown in that game. I mean, just what a difference maker he was. What are your memories of that game and maybe any other individual performances that stand out to you?
That was a fun game because from an offensive line perspective, we knew that it was going to slow down the pass rush that Florida State was known for having. So that was a game that was very sloppy, and we liked it up front and wanted it that way. And yeah, I mean, Sean Taylor, I mean, he just put his fingerprints all over that game. And I mean, I think he showed people that year that he was deserving to be a top overall 5 pick in the NFL draft for years to come. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't speak enough about his performance. But another performance that stands out to me as well was the following year when the rivalry first moved to Labor Day. Sonoris Moss and both Frank Gore. Frank Gore had the winning touchdown, and Sonoris Moss had the tying touchdown on that screen pass late in the game, where I think he just caught it and he just took off, man, with some blocks from myself and some teammates. So, those two performances that year were performances that I think about a lot because, yeah, I mean, we were struggling that game to get anything going, and then that last drive, Sonoris just came through for us, and then in overtime, Frank Gore just came through. Frank Gore came through for us.
Yeah, we got a lot to get to still on this episode of Locked On Canes. Rashad Butler, former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle and former NFL OT as well, joins us here on the show. We're going to talk about some of the specifics for this year's matchup against Florida State. What does Jake Garcia have to do if he indeed is the starter? Is there a chance Tyler Van Dyke plays? What needs to happen for Miami to get that running game going? There's nobody better to talk to about that than a former offensive lineman, of course. And my friends, we have to talk about Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security, but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up because right now, Locked On Canes listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Here's why I love it, my friends. My personal experience with Simply Safe has been incredible. The technology is second to none, guys. Not only do you feel secure because you know your home is armed with the best protection, but you get that HD feed from your security cameras. You can view it right from your smartphone on the app, and it's like watching really slow reality TV. It's like, oh, let me see what's happening outside and inside my house right now. It gets strangely addicting, and you feel so safe knowing what's in your home 24/7. Simply Safe has your back. 24/7 monitoring with a Simply Safe tech support staff. So they always have your back, my friends. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real so they can get priority response to your home. Do not miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/locked on today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so do not wait. Sorry, I got the URL wrong. It's simplysafe.com/locked on college. Use that one. Simplysafe.com/locked on college. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Talking to a former Miami Hurricane and a veteran of this Miami versus Florida State rivalry. Rashad Butler is with us. So attacking Florida State's defense is going to be interesting. And I think no matter what, Miami's going to need to throw the football, take some deep shots to keep Florida State's defense honest because their rushing defense, Rashad, is not great. They give up 145 rushing yards per game. They're 69th in the country, which is basically bang average against the run, but it's hard to run if you can't throw, okay? And last week, Miami got the running game going a little bit. Henry Parrish had over 100 yards, 147 team rushing yards for the Canes. I think Florida State's defense is significantly better than Virginia's. What has to happen up front and what has to happen with Miami's running backs to get a running game going this week?
I think Miami needs to do a better job, in my opinion, of mixing up the run and the pass on early downs. And what I mean is not being so predictive as far as like on first down, let's run the ball, whether it's between the tackles or outside the tackles. I think that, let's just say it is Jake Garcia. I think that you want to mix in some intermediate to short passes, short to intermediate passes, on first downs, and then maybe come back the next drive, once you move the chains and then run the ball again on first down. But I think it's going to be critical to mix up how you want to run and how you want to pass on early downs and not being so predictive as far as like once you get into like, let's just say a second and long scenario where now that some type of pass is coming, and then if that pass is incomplete, now it's you have to pass the ball. So I think Miami needs to do a better job just mixing up the run and the pass, because yes, I understand that FSU they're struggling as far as stopping the run, but at the same time, you don't want to be too predictive as far as like we're going to come out, we're going to run the ball all the time on first downs. I think in order to get Jake Garcia more comfortable as far as throwing the ball, and I think it's imperative that they do a good job as far as mixing up the run and the pass on first downs.
Yeah, and Florida State's passing defense, it's really, really good. They're top 15 in the country against the pass. I think they're number 14 overall. They give up just 177 passing yards per game. Now, if Van Dyke is healthy enough to go, I feel like he can certainly go above that average, especially with Xavier Restrepo being back. We know the chemistry that they have. Do you think that Mario Cristobal might be bluffing, though, Rashad? Because when he spoke on Wednesday, he talked about how Van Dyke has been practicing again, which I'm sure is true because that's not something you can lie about. But he's progressing well. He's practicing. But at various times this year, Cristobal has kind of talked up injured players to make it sound like they're going to play, and they don't. Like there have been times when he was talking up Ja'Kai Clark, Zion Nelson, Henry Parrish before certain games, and they didn't play. And yeah, it's to Mario's advantage to talk up Tyler because that gives Mike Norvell another quarterback to think about. So do you think this is a bluff?
Who knows, man? I think it's great gamesmanship. I think Mario's doing exactly what any smart and intelligent head coach would do. like you just mentioned, give the opposing head coach something to think about, and something to have to game plan for, along with that opposing coach's defensive coordinator. So I love it, but I'm like you. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. What is it, like? What, 90 minutes before kickoff or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and if it is Jake Garcia,
Mhm.
and if it is Jake, I should also mention, actually, no matter which quarterback starts, I think we're going to see some Jakari Brown, because
We
they've
should.
worked
Yeah,
him into these packages. So no matter what, Florida State's going to have really three quarterbacks to think about, because Jakari's going
very
to be
true.
in that mix as well. But if it is Jake Garcia starting, based on what you saw from him last week against Virginia, are you confident he can come out of that shell a little bit? Because to me, he was playing with zero confidence, and it doesn't look like the coaches have a whole lot of confidence in him to complete throws either.
Unfortunately, he has no choice but to come out of that shell.
Yeah.
This is the game where, if he is going to be the starter, Miami is going to need him to do so. And the coaches, who are the ones that are, calling not only calling the plays and Gaddis, but his quarterbacks coach and so forth, they're going to have to really trust him to make plays, because there are going to be points within this game where he's going to have to make plays, whether it's going to be with his legs or whether it's going to be with his arm. So he's going to have to be confident. And the coaches are going to have, like I said, confidence in him, because, again, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but, in games like these, or just games, in general, there are points where, a young quarterback that may be lacking confidence is going to have to grow up really fast, and is going to be um, counted on to make a few plays that, can either swing the game in a positive way or swing the game in a negative way.
Rashad Butler, former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle, is with us here on Locked On Canes. Talking about quarterbacks, Jordan Travis, Florida State quarterback, he's a dual threat guy.
Mhm.
He comes off a career performance against Georgia Tech. Obviously he completed that big 4th and 14, had a good game against Miami last year. What do you think are going to be the big challenges in containing him?
Um, First and foremost, staying in your rush lanes up front. And what I mean by that, for the fans that may not understand, is not rushing wild and not getting behind the quarterback, staying at the level of the quarterback and staying in the quarterback's face. Because, again, anytime you have a dual threat quarterback, if you get behind the quarterback or you get out of your lanes and not in his face, then that opens up the middle for him to take off and run and, convert, third downs and keep the chains moving. And I think, other than that, man, just, I think in the secondary, whatever coverages, are being called, I think that the coverages have to be mixed up just to give him different looks. Because, I think Miami's secondary has struggled, just in all type of coverages, whether they're playing man or whether they're playing zone and things of that nature. So I think it's important, for a quarterback like him, who has a lot of experience, is to switch up your coverages, what I mean, as well as, sending guys after him. But I think more than anything, it's going to be staying in your proper rush lanes, or rushing to contain, and at the same time, just mixing up your coverages on the back end, just giving him a lot more to look at and have to break down and understand.
This game is going to have not only a massive impact on bragging rights and on the way people judge Mario Cristobal's first year at Miami, but it could also have a massive impact on recruiting as well. So we're going to talk about those implications when we come back. So keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. And guys, make sure you are keeping it locked to Sweat Block. I live in South Florida, as many of you listening to this and watching this also do. The humidity here is at like 500% every single day. Stop getting those embarrassing pit stains, guys. I used to suffer from that until I found Sweat Block. It has changed the game for me. Sweat Block was created by a doctor to help with his own excessive sweating. It is doctor created and doctor recommended. If someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, or if you're experiencing it yourself, try Sweat Block. Save 20% with the promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com, and it's also available on Amazon. And hey, guys, make sure for your second listen today, you check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Alex Donno alongside former Miami Hurricanes offensive tackle Rashad Butler. So, Rashad, it's funny. The last time you and I spoke a week ago, we were talking about the challenges of recruiting through, a tough stretch, you're not winning games on the field. And then you're telling people, keep your heads up. Mario's got this. A lot of folks doubted you. And then later that day, Cormani McClain, number 2 player in the entire country, decides he's coming to Miami. So that was a big dub. And there could be more dubs to be had, like another top corner, Damari Brown from American Heritage, who's named Miami a finalist. He's going to be an official visitor this Saturday against Florida State. This is a primetime game, one of the biggest rivalries in college football. What kind of an impact can a game like this have on recruiting?
Huge. Again, let me just say this. I believe in the vision that Mario is, I guess you could say, preaching when he enters the home of these recruits. So I don't want to sound as if I'm contradicting that, because at the same time, a rivalry game like this at home, making sure that the team doesn't lay an egg in front of recruits who do have Miami, high on their list, or have Miami as a finalist on their list. It is important that Miami does come out and not only be competitive, but Miami comes out and Miami wins the game. So this is huge. I mean, do I think that this game is going to be the deciding factor when it comes to a lot of recruits? Again, I don't know, because I'm not in their position, and I don't think it's fair to say that just one game is going to have that big of an impact. But I do know, again, this is a rivalry game. This is a big game. It is on ABC prime time, so I'm sure that recruits are looking at this game as a game that could possibly sway their decision, whether it's in favor of Miami or against Miami.
Can I put you on the spot for a prediction?
Okay.
What do you think happens Saturday?
What did I think? Okay, see, that's tough, man, because I know Hurricane fans, they want me to go Miami.
I'm predicting a dub, Rashad. I'm predicting a 24-21 Miami victory. I think Colby Young and Xavier Restrepo are going to help fuel that. So I'm going with a dub.
Okay, let me say this. If Tyler Van Dyke plays and starts, and he's able to play the entire game, I think Miami wins the game. If Jake Garcia starts, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go with Florida State.
I respect
I'm
it.
going to have to go with Florida State. But me going with Florida State, if Jake Garcia does start, I still think the game will be a lot closer than the spread has it. But, I have more confidence in Tyler just from what I've seen in comparison to Jake.
Well,
sorry, Hurricane fans.
So I guess the moral of the story here is TVD better be ready to go.
He better be. He better be.
He better be ready to go. Oh, man, I always appreciate your time. Guys, make sure you follow Rashad on Twitter, at Rashad Jamal B, and you're going to get the most honest takes during Canes games, because he does not hold back, and we appreciate that. We appreciate the fact that you do not hold back on these shows either. So enjoy the rest of your week, and let's go Canes. I love it. All right, guys, make sure you are making Locked On Sports Today your second listen after you make Locked On Canes your first. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And on tomorrow's episode, we're going to be doing a crossover with Drizzy Drake from Locked On Seminoles. So I'm going to try to garner the confidence to talk a little trash. Maybe I'll confuse Drizzy. He won't know which quarterback to prepare for. I'll say, maybe Ken Dorsey's going to come back. He might have a couple games of eligibility. I'm going to do whatever I can to confound and confuse the Seminoles. So we will talk to you tomorrow with a Locked On crossover right here on Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.